A Song for Silas by Laurie Wick. Chapter 12. Silas spooned soup into his mouth from the most beautiful china bowl he had ever seen. The spoon in his hand was heavy with a large ornate R engraved on the handle. It was obvious even to the most casual observer that everything in the Randall dining room, and probably the entire house, was of high quality and cost. As he continued to eat, Silas watched Evan Randall converse with his niece. Silas tried to look at Amy, but she was partially hidden by a vase of fresh flowers sitting on the table between them. Silas found it odd that Evan made no attempt to include him or his wife in the conversation. Still, Silas continued to study the man. He was slim, like his wife, and a few inches taller. His hair was a medium shade of brown, but his thin mustache and short, pointed beard were nearly black. Silas studied the man's eyes. They were unsmiling eyes. Even when the corners of Evan's mouth had turned up, his eyes had stayed flat, almost expressionless. Silas remembered the way they had skimmed over him earlier when they were introduced. Silas had the distinct impression he'd been assessed and found wanting. Silas's thoughts were interrupted when the soup bowls were removed. He met Amy's blue eyes just over the top of a red rose when the butler announced the serving of roast duck. Those eyes twinkled at him before Amy turned to answer a question posed by her uncle. The meal progressed, and by the time dessert arrived, Silas was a bit antsy. He was not used to taking so much time over a midday meal, and especially when he had not been allowed more than 2 sentences worth of conversation. Amy must have been aware of the time also. Not more than 10 minutes passed after the meal ended when she said they had to be leaving. She hugged her aunt goodbye and promised to return soon. Silas stayed in the house a moment longer to add his thanks to Bev Randall as Evan walked Amy to the wagon. Once outside, he caught part of their conversation as he approached. "Please, Amy, don't reject the idea out of hand. You'll always be welcome in this home. If you don't feel good about leaving your father in someone else's care, then plan to come when he's back on his feet." Amy opened her mouth to speak, but Evan held up his hand to forestall her. "Don't give me an answer now. Just think on it, and know the offer I made before your father's accident still stands." "All right, Uncle Evan. I'll talk to you later." Amy's voice sounded almost sad. Silas had boarded the wagon and was surprised when Evan reached across Amy to shake his hand. His smile was almost warm. His words were even more surprising. "I'm glad you're here, Silas. I hope with your help Amy's father will be up and about soon." He didn't wait for a reply, but turned and walked back to the house. Silas sat for a moment and stared at the woman beside him. When she did not look at him, but sat staring somewhere beyond the horse's ears, he spoke. "I don't suppose you'd care to tell me what that was all about?" He watched Amy frown and bite her lower lip, telling him she'd heard his question, but she made no move to answer. Just as silently, Silas urged the team forward. Amy still had not spoken at the edge of town, and Silas left her to her thoughts, even though his were racing. He had not liked the bit of conversation he'd heard, or the unexpected words directed to him from the town banker. Something told him Evan Randall never acted unselfishly. Silas shook his head slightly over his judgmental attitude. The last thing Evan Randall needed was Silas's condemnation. What he really needed was prayer, and Silas was suddenly thankful for Amy's silence as he began to pray silently. Amy, sitting so quietly on her side of the wagon, was praying also. Not just praying, but begging God for wisdom in this impossible situation that was bound to bring pain to someone she loved. A few weeks before her father's accident, Evan had approached her about coming to live in town with him and Bev. Amy had been so surprised that she had not known what to say. She had rarely seen her uncle so excited. "You have no social life when you live so far out of town. Bev and I have more space in this house than we know what to do with. I know you would never make this move without talking to your father, but I'll say this much, Amy." And here his voice grew very stern. "If your father really loves you, he won't stand in the way of your happiness." Amy had been dumbfounded by his words. She had never expected to receive such an invitation from her uncle, and she wondered where in the world he got the idea she was unhappy on the farm. Amy was still reeling from shock when her uncle spoke his first insensitive words to her. "I don't have to remind you, Amy, that Deborah Wheeler is a town girl. Now, I think Thomas Blaine is a fool to give you up, and obviously not good enough for you, but the truth is that the most eligible men are from town, and they would naturally want wives from town." Had Amy not been so stunned by his words, she would have burst into tears. She was well on her way to getting over Thomas. In fact, she was doing so well she wondered if indeed it had been love she had felt for him. But these words, coming so cruelly from her adored uncle, that somehow her being from the farm had not made her good enough, were almost more than she could bear. Even now they caused a sharp pain in the region of her heart. It didn't help that Amy thought Deborah Wheeler very beautiful, and her pride had suffered a severe blow at being tossed over for one of the most attractive girls in Neilsville. Suddenly she wanted to talk it over with Silas, but after the way she had treated him in front of her uncle's house, she wasn't sure he was speaking to her. "Silas, are you angry with me?" "No. Should I be?" "Yes." "How do you figure?" "Well, you asked me a question in town, and I wouldn't even look at you." "That's true. But did you stop to think that I asked you a question that was none of my business?" Amy shifted on the seat to look at Silas as he pulled the team to a halt. They were still about half a mile from the house. "Oh, Silas, I wasn't offended by your question. Never think that. But I'm in a terrible mess, and I really need someone to talk to, and it can't be my dad. If he ever found out, he'd be just crushed." "Found out about what?" Silas asked, his eyes leveled on her face. Had she not said a word, he would have known something or someone was playing havoc with her heart. For an instant he thought it might be the man she had been engaged to, and wondered why this idea bothered him so much. Amy was unaware that her face was a mask of confusion and grief as she answered, "Before Dad's accident, Uncle Evan asked me to come and live with him and Aunt Bev. Today he assured me the offer still stands." Amy spoke the words quietly, and Silas understood almost instantly the dilemma she was in. She had long been an envoy of peace amid these two families, and now she found herself between the kettle and the coals. No matter what her choice, someone she loved was going to be hurt.